Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. We start our video with a funny story, but get ready, the second one will be much more serious. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. You got what you asked for. Not my story, but my mother's toward my father back in the 80s. My dad was a prankster, joker, tease, whatever you want to call it. That's just the way he was. He pulled all kinds of things on my mom. Some were funny and some upset her to no end. This is a story about how mom got upset and got back at dad. For years, my father worked at a pulp and paper mill with a set schedule of Monday to Friday, 8 to 4. It was no more than a 5-minute drive from work to home, and with him getting washed up, we always ate at 4:30. The house rule was if you came home late, you had to eat your food cold. Punishment for not being home at mealtime. 90% of the time, Dad was good with this rule since he was the one who made it up and enforced it many times. One of the days he was late for supper, he was going to put his food in the microwave to heat up. Mom stopped him and reminded him of his own rule. He sat there and ate his supper cold again. But after he got done eating, he looked at Mom and said something along the lines of, "Cold supper isn't bad. I don't know what you kids always whine about." The next day, Dad made it home on time and sat to eat with us. He took a bite, got a really odd look on his face, and said to Mom, "My supper's cold." She gave him the look and said, "Yes, yesterday you said you like your supper cold, so I made yours at lunchtime. I only cooked for the kids and I for supper tonight. And don't think about heating it up." For the next 2 weeks, my dad ate cold suppers. Mom must have thought he learned his lesson because he was never late without good reason and always ate every bite of food every night and complimented her on a great meal. I mean, every night. Right up until he passed away in 2019. Sounds like true love between your mom and dad. And our next story. General Contractor ends up paying big dollars for their error. Several years ago, Barry, my boss, did a job for Big Daddy Construction and got screwed. It wasn't a huge amount of money, a couple $1,000s, but screwed is screwed. Basically, he accepted Big Daddy's word on something that they denied later. Barry consulted his lawyer and was told that since the issue was not in writing, that any legal action was likely to fail, and even if he won, that the legal costs would exceed any settlement. And Big Daddy basically said, "My lawyer can beat up your lawyer." Barry then asked what every lawyer likes to hear. What should I have done differently? Fast forward to 2017, Big Daddy is soliciting bids for a new restaurant called Fancy Butt. Barry submits a bid for supplying and installing door hardware, things like doorknobs, emergency exit bars, door closers that pull the doors shut, and 3 automatic door operators, ADOs. Barry wins the bid and calls a meeting. He's handling this job personally. All communication with Big Daddy is to go through Barry and only Barry. If someone from Big Daddy calls and says, "Nice weather, isn't it?" we are to reply, "I wouldn't know anything about that. Let me transfer you to Barry's line." Under no circumstances is anyone from Big Daddy to be given Barry's cell number, and the after-hours on-call texts are only to return the call and say Barry will be in touch in the morning. Violation of any of this will be grounds for immediate dismissal for cause. Is this perfectly clear? A few weeks go by and we get a call from GC, who's not only running the job for Big Daddy, but is Big Daddy's son. He's an entitled crapball of a tyrant with anger issues and a vocabulary that relies heavily on profanity. I'm calling him GC because that's his job title, General Contractor. For those who don't know, a GC is responsible for ensuring that everything gets done on a construction site in the correct order. This might be a good time to give you a visual of the restaurant layout. The decor was fancy and meant to resemble a Victorian gentleman's club with oak throughout and thick carpets on the floors. Worthy of mention is the feature wall at the front with alcoves for displaying sculptures and places to hang paintings. So GC calls us and they're ready for the ADOs. We arrive and install. By the terms of the bid, it's Big Daddy's responsibility to supply dedicated 120-volt electricity for the ADOs and to run the 12-volt wires from the activation plates to the top of the doorway so they can be connected to the circuit board for the ADO. This wasn't present at the time of the install, so he ran an extension cord to power the ADO and used a wireless transmitter and receiver to trigger it. All this was specified in the bid, which said that we could install and then return to hook up the wires once they get run. Barry came and supervised the tech installing the ADOs personally. When GC signed off, buried in the description was a line or two referencing the relevant sections of the bid. When GC signed off on the handicap washroom install, there was a line noting that Big Daddy assumes all responsibility for compliance with the relevant building code section. GC didn't bother to read what he was signing, just scribbled a signature and took his copy. Barry made certain the tech was right beside him when GC signed off. ProRevenge. GC called a few days after discovering that the entrance doors needed 120 volt to tell Barry that his 120 volt was available. Barry heads down with the tech to check it out. In the vestibule was a heater known as an air curtain. It's a big heater designed to push a high volume of warmed air into the vestibule to mitigate cold outside air entering the restaurant. It pulls a significant amount of electricity every time it kicks on, and GC had tied the 120 volt for the entrance door ADOs into the same circuit. Barry explains that the bid specified that the ADOs required their own dedicated circuits, one for each. GC responds that he doesn't give a crap, hook the GD things up, so Barry does and has GC sign off again. Only this time, buried in the sign-off sheet is an acknowledgement that by not providing dedicated circuits, all warranties are void and subsequent service would be billable. Just like usual, GC scribbles his signature and takes his copy without reading it. These ADOs are finicky about power. There's a motor, obviously, controlled by a circuit board that determines how fast the door opens, how long it stays open, how fast it closes, how much force is used, that sort of thing. If it takes a spike in power, it fails, and the ADO no longer functions. A power spike blows a fuse and damages one of the components of the control board. This is replaceable, and the part's worth about $30. The control board can be fixed in about half an hour, with another half hour on a scope to make sure everything's good. Barry had sent one of the techs to the manufacturer to be certified in rebuilding the board, even though our standard was to just ship them back to the manufacturer and get a replacement. Sure enough, a couple days later, GC calls in a panic. They have the final occupancy inspection scheduled for the next day, and one of the ADOs at the entrance is down. GC, your effing ADO isn't working. Get down here and fix it. Barry, okay, but this isn't covered under warranty. It's billable. GC, what the F are you talking about? It's not even been a week and it's broken. It's warranty. Barry, no warranties were all voided when you didn't provide clean power. GC, F that. Get down here and put in a new ADO. Barry, it doesn't need a new ADO. It needs a new control board. And I can get a new control board from the manufacturer in 4 to 6 weeks. GC loses his mind. There's no way he can delay the opening of Fancy Butt for 6 weeks waiting for a part. He calls Barry every name in the book, threatens legal action, etc. Barry responds, look, GC, I have a control board on the shelf that was rebuilt by a factory-certified technician. I can have it to you at 80% of the list price of a new one, and I can have it installed by noon tomorrow. Do you want the rebuild or the new part? And do you agree that it's billable as per the terms of the bid? GC, yes, just get the effing thing fixed by tomorrow. Now, Barry knows that GC and Big Daddy were going to F him just like they did years ago. That ended up being a I never said that dispute. What GC didn't know was every time he called Barry, the call was recorded. You know this call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes that you get when you dial in? Well, Barry never used his cell phone, never initiated a call, and every time GC called in, it was recorded and archived. Every single time. Sure enough, another couple days go by, and an ADO goes down again. Barry asks if GC is good with the rebuild, gets confirmation, removes the blown part, installs the rebuild, then takes the blown control board back to the shop and rebuilds it. A new control board is $750. The rebuild, he's charging $600 for a part that costs maybe $75 to get back into shape. The bid specified that non-warranty service was $125 an hour minimum 4 hours, so tack on another $500 for labor, and it takes maybe 45 minutes to install a new control board and dial it in, so every control board replacement was generating $1,100. There were 27 blown control board swaps in the first 2 months. GC called in every one of them, and Barry got his verbal approved. If someone from Fancy Butt called in, we gave them GC's number and said that we could only come and fix it if GC was the one to call it in. Then Barry gets a call from Daddy of Big Daddy wanting to know what the invoice for almost 30 grand is for. Barry explains, and a meeting is called. Barry brings his lawyer and all copies of the sign-off sheets as well as transcripts of every conversation he had with GC. It becomes very apparent that GC effed up large and that Barry had every I dotted and every T crossed. Big Daddy is glaring daggers at GC and basically tells Barry that if he wants to get paid, he's going to have to sue for the money. Barry smiles and slides his ace across the table. It's a contractor's lien against Big Daddy, Fancy Butt Restaurant, and Massive Realty Company, the owners of the building. Here's the thing. Fancy Butt was owned by internationally famous chef, IFC, who makes his living getting very important people to invest in opening a new restaurant. This is a place where they go to be very important and bring their business contacts with them. After a short time, when the restaurant's the happening place in town, the investors sell the place and cash out large. IFC sticks around, helps with the transition, and makes a percentage of the restaurant's profits for the use of his name. He's built an income stream with the investors' money, and the investors make a nice return. Only now they can't sell with a lien on the place, and these investors have rabid effing pit bulls as lawyers. Hell, some of them are lawyers. See you in court, Big Daddy. Only you're not facing Barry's lawyer, you're facing a whole new level of legal expertise. Have fun with that. Barry got his revenge and then withdrew services based on the disputed invoice. He's the only company allowed to service and install this brand of ADO, as he has a protected territory from the manufacturer, and he does 7 figures worth of business with them every year. The only other companies anywhere nearby were warned off by the manufacturer, who even relayed the fact that Big Daddy had called them directly looking for service, and they referred Big Daddy to Barry. Barry will definitely get paid, as it's a standard to hold back 10% of the payment to a construction company for a year, but the holdback will definitely cover the invoice. So Fancy Butt will pay Barry and then take it out of Big Daddy's holdback. Either that or they'll sue Big Daddy into dust and force Big Daddy to cough up and settle the lien. Way to go, Barry. Nicely played. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.